That can apply to combat. That can apply to business. People are going to start panicking. What are they going to do when they start panicking? You and the leader, as the leader, need to step up, get out there, talk to people, find out what's going on. Some thoughts on leadership from Dick Winters. Every soldier at one time or another experiences a degree of fear. Courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the willingness to rise above fear and do the things you know need to be accomplished. All soldiers hope that they will measure up the first time they get into a fight. I certainly was no exception, but I believe I had prepared myself very well that once I came under fire, I knew instinctively what needed to be done. I think I was more apprehensive, particularly before D-Day, than I was afraid. Maybe apprehension is the first stage of fear. I'm not really sure. You have to remember that Easy Company was an elite unit, as were all paratroopers. We had trained for nearly 2 years before we jumped into Normandy. I think I saw far more excitement in the eyes of my men than I did fear. After Brecourt, we felt as if we were seasoned veterans, even though we knew worse days were ahead. Yeah. That apprehension, and definitely my first deployment to Iraq, when you had all these guys, bro, the guys were so fired up to do real missions and get after it, that I think it was much more excitement than it was fear, especially in the beginning. And in the beginning, there wasn't a lot of casualties going on. We were kind of dominating.
Right.
And, even showing up to Ramadi, same thing. Guys were like, sign me up. What mission? I'm going.
Yeah.
And the more you spend time in that, the more you realize what the threat is, and you start losing guys or having guys getting wounded. That's when you start saying, okay, wait a second. I'm not sure I want to die today. Yeah. And then guys got to overcome that on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Speaking of fear, Steve Ambrose, who's a military historian, wrote a bunch of books, including Band of Brothers. Steve Ambrose says that heavy artillery bombardment will make even the most seasoned veteran eventually break. I disagree. A leader has to overcome fear, convince himself that every enemy shell or bullet is not targeting him. The same is true in a company or a battalion. Leaders must ensure that strength and cohesion is a stronger force than fear. This is especially true in men who have been scarred by prolonged combat. Ambrose was correct when he titled the chapter in Band of Brothers Breaking Point, as he describes the horrendous artillery barrage that inflicted so many casualties on Easy Company in the Bois Jacques. Company strength was below 50%, and many of the non-commissioned officers were killed or wounded. Without direct supervision by leaders, Easy Company, as well as the remainder of the battalion, could have easily been debilitated by an increased sense of morality and fear. That is precisely why I made it a point to visit the front lines as often as possible. Soldiers need to sense that their leaders and commanders are in the game with them. Leadership by example is even more important in these situations. I noticed that when men are at the edge of their physical endurance, you tend to develop that 1,000-yard stare that you always read about. Tired soldiers will often take off their helmet and run their fingers through their hair. I've talked about that before, and I talk about that quite often now. At times, they literally drop their helmets on the ground. This soldier is already losing his self-respect. The battle is half lost. That's a sign for the commander to take immediate action. I didn't wait for the trooper to reach that stage. I proactively looked for these signs. Every soldier wants to do the right thing. You always know the proper thing to do, but doing it is sometimes more difficult. I never wanted a man to lose his self-respect. Now there's a guy named Lieutenant Compton who kind of breaks a little bit, and they show it in the Band of Brothers movie, and Dick Winters talks about it here. Back to the book. Before you go on, I know you think I'm too hard on Lieutenant Compton for walking off the line at Bastogne. Let me explain myself. Buck, that's Lieutenant Compton, was nicknamed Buck, and he walked off the line. Buck was a great combat leader. He was a superb platoon leader in Normandy and Holland. In fact, I would say he was one of the best. At Bastogne, he broke after some of his friends were seriously wounded in the constant artillery barrages. There is a danger of getting too close to the men, and Buck crossed that line. When you see your friends getting maimed, it makes it more difficult to go on. That's why I always maintained a certain detachment from the paratroopers in Easy Company. Am I too harsh on Buck? Maybe, but a leader needs to rise above fear. The easiest thing to do is quit. Now he starts talking a little bit about combat fatigue. In civilian life, of course, we refer to combat fatigue as a mental breakdown. That is exactly the way it is in combat. It's a mental breakdown. The intensity, it becomes a problem for me to express my feelings here, but I'd like to share it with you. The intensity of a fire or a heavy concentration, to be a leader, you have to be able to concentrate on that fire and move just as soon as it stops or the last rounds hit. Move. Get up. Start circulating among your men. Is everybody okay? Let's get up. Let's move. Keep your eye open for an attack. Get their attention. Move among your men as quickly as possible. And moving among them, the fact that they see you and they're talking to you, they know that you are there and you are talking to them, and it makes all the difference in the world to know that you are not in this thing by yourself. That's what officers must do. Break the cycle of fear. If a soldier is concentrating on his own feelings and on his own fear, and he sees you moving around, he realizes that you're sharing the burden with him. That's why he can then move. So that's very important. And that's, again, that can apply to combat, that can apply to business. People are going to start panicking. What are they going to do when they start panicking? You and the leader, as the leader, need to step up, get out there, talk to people, find out what's going on, tell them that we're going to move. Show them that you're not afraid and that you are afraid, but you're still functioning. Lead by example. Plain and simple. Back to the book. Courage will be spent if you relax your standards. An undisciplined soldier feels isolated and alone. Maintain the standards. Don't compromise your integrity. Never give up. Don't ever give up. I love this right here. There is always one more thing that a leader can do to improve his situation, and that of his command. I always felt that a leader's physical presence was indispensable to unit cohesion and morale. This is why Captain Sobel failed so miserably. Leadership by example always trumps leadership by fear. There's always one more thing that a leader can do to improve his situation and that of his command. There's always one more thing you can do.